A quiet residential street in Scotland. Early morning, June 8, 2024. A BT engineer's van sits parked outside his home. Hidden beneath it, a pipe bomb packed with petrol and ball bearings, rigged with a remote detonator. The explosion that followed would trigger evacuations, bomb disposal experts, a massive police investigation. But this wasn't terrorism in the traditional sense. This was revenge. Biker club against biker club. And at the center of it all, one man's decision to break away from Scotland's most feared motorcycle gang. What this documentary will cover. In this film, we'll uncover the explosive story behind Scotland's oldest outlaw biker club, the Blue Angels, and the bitter split that created their deadly rivals, the Mad Dogs. At the center is Daniel Laponder, a former Blue Angels member whose betrayal ignited a feud that would terrorize communities across Scotland. We'll explore how this conflict began, the escalating cycle of violence that followed, and the pipe bomb attack that shocked the nation. From torched motorcycles to threats of violence, we'll trace how a brotherhood dispute became a criminal enterprise investigation. We'll also follow the dramatic police manhunt, the evidence that led to Laponder's conviction, and his eventual sentencing to 9 years in prison for what prosecutors called an act of domestic terrorism. This isn't speculation. Every detail comes from verified court records, police statements, and news reports from Scotland's most trusted outlets. Our goal is to show exactly how loyalty turned to hatred in Scotland's biker underworld. Biker gangs in Scotland. Who are the Blue Angels? To understand the violence that erupted in 2024, you first have to know who the Blue Angels are. Formed in Glasgow in 1963 by Alan Morrison and Billy Stone Gordon, they are widely recognized as the oldest outlaw motorcycle club in Europe. While the Hells Angels dominate headlines worldwide, in Scotland it has long been the Blue Angels who set the tone. What began as a small crew emerging from Glasgow's gang culture has grown into an organization with genuine reach. Current estimates put their membership at around 200 in Scotland alone, spread across multiple chapters from the Central Belt to the northeast. But their influence extends far beyond Scotland's borders, with established chapters in England, Belgium, and Spain. The Blue Angels don't just ride motorcycles, they operate with the structure and discipline of a criminal organization. Members wear distinctive patches featuring a winged skull in a German helmet, along with the coveted 1% badge that signals their outlaw status. The club's colors and insignia were legally protected in 1997, underscoring their established position in Scotland's underworld. Over the years, police and intelligence services have linked them to organized crime networks across Europe. The evidence was so compelling that Belgian federal police officially designated the Blue Angels as a criminal motorcycle gang, a recognition that highlighted their reputation not just as bikers, but as players in serious criminal enterprises. Their founder, Alan Morrison, died in January 2020, and his funeral in Glasgow drew 400 bikers from across Europe. The massive turnout demonstrated the respect and fear the Blue Angels command in international biker circles. By 2024, they were no fringe group. They were an institution, rooted in Scottish criminal history and closely watched by law enforcement agencies across multiple countries. Understanding their power and reputation is crucial because what happened next wasn't random gang violence. It was a direct challenge to an organization that had spent 60 years building fear, respect, and absolute loyalty among its members. And in the world of outlaw motorcycle clubs, challenges like that always come with consequences. The split. How the Mad Dogs were born. The violence that would terrorize Scottish communities in 2024 began with an act that outlaw motorcycle clubs consider the ultimate betrayal, a senior member walking away to start a rival organization. In 2023, Daniel Laponder, a long-standing member of the Blue Angels, made the decision that would ignite one of Scotland's most dangerous biker feuds. Laponder wasn't just any member. He was established within the club hierarchy, someone who understood the Blue Angels' operations, territory, and weaknesses. When he announced his departure to found the Mad Dogs Motorcycle Club, it sent shockwaves through Scotland's biker community. In outlaw club culture, leaving isn't just resignation, it's seen as theft of brotherhood, secrets, and reputation. The Mad Dogs weren't content to remain a quiet breakaway group. From the beginning, they positioned themselves as a direct challenge to Blue Angels' authority. They claimed territory, recruited members, and most provocatively, operated in areas the Blue Angels had long considered their domain, for a club built on absolute loyalty and respect. Laponder's rebellion represented an existential threat. The Blue Angels' response was swift and brutal. According to court testimony that would later emerge, motorcycles belonging to Laponder's associates were set on fire in the dead of night. The message was clear: betrayal comes with a price, and that price extends to anyone who supports the traitors. But the intimidation campaign went further. A group of Blue Angels members visited Laponder's home, delivering threats of violence that left no doubt about the consequences of his continued defiance. For most people, such threats would have been enough to flee the country or abandon the venture entirely. Laponder, however, saw these attacks not as warnings to back down, but as declarations of war. His response would escalate the feud from intimidation to outright terrorism, transforming a dispute between bikers into a criminal investigation that would involve bomb disposal experts, major incident protocols, and eventually, the High Court in Glasgow. The stage was set for violence that would shock even experienced law enforcement officers familiar with Scotland's gang culture. What had begun as a brotherhood dispute was about to become something much more dangerous. Escalation, from threats to bombs. By early 2024, the feud between the Blue Angels and Mad Dogs had already established a pattern of retaliation and escalation. Motorcycles were being torched, properties vandalized, and threats delivered with increasing boldness. But on June 8, 2024, Daniel Laponder crossed a line that would transform him from gang member to domestic terrorist. His target wasn't another biker. It was David Rollo, an innocent man whose only connection to the feud was having a son in the Blue Angels. Rollo worked as a BT engineer and had no involvement in motorcycle club politics. He was simply a father whose family connection made him a target in Laponder's escalating campaign of revenge. On the evening of June 7th, Rollo parked his BT open-reach van outside his home in Lennoxtown, East Dunbartonshire, as he had done countless times before. What he didn't know was that he was being watched. Laponder and an associate had been planning this attack, purchasing materials, and preparing for what court documents would later describe as a significant escalation in the ongoing feud. Late that night, Laponder crept beneath the van and attached a sophisticated explosive device. The bomb consisted of 2 plastic bottles filled with petrol and ball bearings, connected to copper piping and rigged with a remote detonator. The ball bearings were designed to create deadly shrapnel. This wasn't meant to be a warning shot, but a weapon capable of killing anyone nearby when it detonated. The next morning, the device exploded with devastating force. An off-duty firefighter was among the first to respond, describing a scene of destruction that included not just the burning van, but sophisticated bomb components scattered across the residential street. The explosion was so powerful that it triggered a major incident declaration, forcing police to evacuate local residents, while a Royal Navy explosive ordnance disposal unit was called in to ensure no other devices were present. For the quiet community of Lennoxtown, it was a terrifying introduction to the reality of organized gang violence. Families were forced from their homes, while bomb experts combed the area for additional threats. Children couldn't return to school until the all-clear was given. A working-class neighborhood had become a crime scene that resembled something from Northern Ireland's Troubles rather than suburban Scotland. Laponder had achieved his goal of sending a message to the Blue Angels, but he had also committed an act that police and prosecutors would classify as domestic terrorism. The investigation that followed would uncover not just this bombing, but evidence of a criminal enterprise prepared for sustained violent conflict. The investigation, digital footprints, and DNA evidence. Police Scotland launched a massive investigation into what they quickly classified as a terrorist incident. The sophisticated nature of the device, the targeting of a civilian, and the potential for mass casualties elevated this far beyond typical gang violence. What investigators discovered was a criminal enterprise that had documented its own crimes through social media and careless evidence handling. The breakthrough came through the Mad Dogs Motorcycle Club's own Facebook page. Investigators found posts showing Laponder and his associate with a Range Rover, the same vehicle captured on doorbell camera footage at the scene of the bombing. Even more damaging, the pair had posted about their activities on the day of the attack with the caption, "Hooked up with this reprobate today. Interesting stuff." The digital evidence was overwhelming, but police also uncovered physical proof that would make conviction inevitable. Store receipts showed Laponder purchasing duct tape and water bottles, identical to those used in constructing the bomb. When forensic experts examined the device components, they found Laponder's DNA and fingerprints on the bottles and tape, evidence that directly placed him at the scene of bomb construction. The investigation expanded beyond the bombing itself. On July 3, 2024, police traced Laponder to his residence, a barge moored at Kirkintilloch, where he had been living. When officers arrived, Laponder immediately disclosed the presence of a sawn-off shotgun, which was recovered and found to be loaded and ready for use. Simultaneously, police raided a garage associated with the Mad Dogs Motorcycle Club. Inside, they discovered 2 remote firing systems, similar to the one used in the van bombing, evidence that suggested this was not an isolated incident, but part of a broader campaign of violence involving multiple prepared weapons. The forensic examination of the bomb revealed its lethal sophistication. The device contained not just petrol as an incendiary agent, but ball bearings designed to create deadly shrapnel. The remote detonation system allowed the bomber to observe the target area and choose the moment of maximum impact. Police experts testified that the weapon was designed to kill, not merely intimidate. When questioned, Laponder's responses revealed both the depth of the feud and his role as its primary escalator. "I'm not a Blue Angel anymore. I retired a year ago," he told investigators. When asked about the bombing, he replied, "Link the dots. We've been getting attacked all the time. What is a remote detonator? It goes off with a remote. Perhaps it was a shot across the bow." Those words would prove crucial in court, showing not remorse, but a calculated mindset that viewed bombing civilians as justified retaliation. The investigation had uncovered not just a single crime, but evidence of an ongoing terrorist campaign between rival motorcycle clubs operating on Scottish soil. Trial and conviction. Justice served. On October 16, 2024, Daniel Laponder appeared at the High Court in Glasgow to face the consequences of his bombing campaign. The 43-year-old ground worker had initially attempted to contest the charges, but faced with overwhelming physical and digital evidence, he ultimately pled guilty to 2 serious offenses: willful fire-raising and illegal possession of a firearm. The court proceedings revealed the full scope of Laponder's criminal enterprise. Prosecutor Lorraine Glancy KC presented evidence showing how the bombing had been meticulously planned and executed with the clear intent to cause maximum damage. The sophisticated remote detonation system, the use of ball bearings as shrapnel, and the targeting of a civilian's workplace vehicle all pointed to what legal experts classified as domestic terrorism. Laponder's defense team, led by John Scullion KC, attempted to portray their client as a victim of escalating gang violence who had simply responded to attacks on his associates. They argued that motorcycles belonging to Laponder's friends had been set on fire and that he had been threatened with violence at his home by Blue Angels members. The defense characterized the bombing as a misguided attempt to end the feud by retaliating against those involved in previous incidents. However, Judge Lord Arthurson was unimpressed by attempts to justify terrorism as gang politics. During sentencing, he described the background to the offenses as somewhat bizarre, stemming from a feud between the Blue Angels and Mad Dogs after you left the Blue Angels. But he made clear that personal grievances could never justify actions that endangered innocent civilians and terrorized entire communities. The judge emphasized the sophisticated nature of the weapons involved, noting that both the bomb and the shotgun represented serious weapons that posed extreme danger to public safety. He observed that the bombing had required very substantial planning and showed a deliberate escalation in the ongoing feud that crossed all acceptable boundaries. On November 27, 2024, Lord Arthurson delivered his sentence, 9 years in prison. The judge stated that a very substantial custodial disposal is inevitable in this case. and that the offenses represented a level of criminal sophistication that demanded the strongest possible response from the justice system. The sentence sent a clear message to Scotland's outlaw motorcycle community that gang feuds would not be tolerated when they endangered civilian populations. For Laponder, it meant that his attempt to challenge the Blue Angels had cost him his freedom and effectively ended his role in the biker world he had tried to reshape. For the victims, David Rollo and his family, as well as the terrorized Lennoxtown community, the conviction provided some measure of justice. But questions remained about whether Laponder's imprisonment would truly end the feud or simply pause it until other players decided to continue the cycle of retaliation. The broader context, Scotland's biker violence problem. The Laponder case highlighted a troubling pattern of motorcycle gang violence that has plagued Scotland for years. While his bombing represented an extreme escalation, it was part of a broader culture of retaliation and intimidation that regularly spills over into civilian communities across the country. Scotland has experienced recurring waves of biker-related violence, each cycle marked by arson attacks, weapon possession, and confrontations that endanger ordinary citizens. The Blue Angels, as the country's oldest and most established outlaw club, have been linked to numerous incidents involving organized crime, territorial disputes, and violent enforcement of their reputation. Previous conflicts have included feuds with other motorcycle clubs like the Nomads, the Satan's Slaves, and attempts to prevent clubs like the Outlaws from establishing Scottish chapters. Each dispute has followed a similar pattern: territorial challenges leading to escalating violence that eventually draws in law enforcement and terrorizes local communities. The bombing also revealed how modern technology has changed the nature of gang warfare. Social media platforms like Facebook have become tools for both planning attacks and inadvertently providing evidence to investigators. The digital footprints left by Laponder and his associates showed how criminal enterprises now operate in plain sight, documenting their activities online while believing they remain beyond the reach of law enforcement. Perhaps most concerning is how these feuds impact innocent people. David Rollo was targeted not for his own actions, but because of his family connection to the Blue Angels. His case represents hundreds of family members, neighbors, and community members who find themselves caught in conflicts they never chose to join. The sophisticated weapons involved, remote detonation systems, illegal firearms, and shrapnel-filled explosives also demonstrate how far removed modern biker violence has become from the bar fights and fistfights of previous generations. Today's outlaw clubs operate more like terrorist cells, with access to military-grade weapons and the willingness to use them against civilian targets. For law enforcement agencies across Scotland, the Laponder case has become a template for how to investigate and prosecute modern motorcycle gang violence. The combination of digital surveillance, forensic evidence, and terrorism charges represents a new approach to dismantling criminal enterprises that have traditionally hidden behind codes of silence and intimidation. Community impact and ongoing concerns. The bombing in Lennoxtown left scars that extended far beyond the destroyed van and damaged property. For residents of the quiet East Dunbartonshire community, the incident shattered any illusion that gang violence was confined to urban areas or criminal circles. The sight of bomb disposal experts and evacuation procedures brought the reality of organized crime directly to their doorsteps. David Rollo and his family faced not only the immediate trauma of being targeted by terrorists, but the ongoing fear that the feud might not end with Laponder's imprisonment. As court testimony revealed, gang conflicts often persist across generations, with new members taking up causes that began long before their involvement. The knowledge that his son's membership in the Blue Angels had made his entire family a target has fundamentally changed how the Rollo family approaches daily life and personal security. Local authorities struggle to reassure communities that such incidents were isolated rather than part of a broader pattern. The sophisticated nature of the bombing, combined with the discovery of additional weapons and remote detonation systems, suggested that criminal enterprises were operating at a level of organization and capability that challenged traditional policing methods. Schools in the area had to implement new security protocols, acknowledging that gang violence could now appear anywhere without warning. Local businesses reported decreased foot traffic and increased insurance costs as the community grappled with its new reputation as a location where domestic terrorism had occurred. For law enforcement, the case highlighted both successes and ongoing challenges. While the investigation successfully identified, arrested, and convicted the perpetrators, it also revealed how easily criminal enterprises can acquire military-grade weapons and explosives. The speed with which Laponder escalated from gang member to domestic terrorist raised questions about early intervention and monitoring of known criminal organizations. The broader Scottish community was forced to confront uncomfortable questions about how much gang violence they were willing to tolerate in exchange for avoiding more aggressive law enforcement measures. The balance between civil liberties and public safety became a topic of intense debate, particularly regarding surveillance of outlaw motorcycle clubs and their online activities. What this case reveals about modern gang warfare. The Blue Angels versus Mad Dogs, feud represents a fundamental shift in how outlaw motorcycle clubs conduct their conflicts. Traditional biker violence, bar fights, one-on-one confrontations, and property damage has evolved into sophisticated criminal enterprises capable of domestic terrorism. Laponder's use of remote detonation technology, social media coordination, and targeting of civilian family members reflects tactics more commonly associated with international terrorist organizations than motorcycle clubs. This evolution poses new challenges for law enforcement agencies that were trained to handle conventional gang violence rather than organized terrorism campaigns. The case also demonstrates how personal grievances within criminal organizations can rapidly escalate to threaten public safety. What began as Laponder's decision to leave the Blue Angels ultimately required bomb disposal experts, major incident protocols, and counter-terrorism resources. The cost to Scottish taxpayers, in terms of both emergency response and judicial proceedings, illustrates how gang feuds have become a broader societal problem. Perhaps most significantly, the case shows how digital evidence has become the primary tool for investigating modern criminal enterprises. Laponder's conviction relied heavily on social media posts, digital purchases, and electronic surveillance, evidence types that didn't exist during earlier generations of gang violence. This shift has implications for both law enforcement capabilities and criminal privacy rights. The international connections revealed through the investigation, with Blue Angels chapters across Europe and criminal networks spanning multiple countries, also highlight how local gang violence now operates within global criminal enterprises. Scottish authorities found themselves investigating connections to Belgian, Spanish, and English criminal organizations, requiring international cooperation and intelligence sharing. For the general public, the case serves as a stark reminder that organized crime has evolved far beyond the romanticized image of motorcycle clubs as rebellious but ultimately harmless groups. Today's outlaw clubs operate sophisticated criminal enterprises that pose genuine threats to community safety and national security. Lessons for law enforcement and policy. The successful prosecution of Daniel Laponder offers several important lessons for how Scottish authorities should approach future motorcycle gang violence. The combination of traditional investigative techniques with digital surveillance and forensic evidence created an overwhelming case that left little room for denial or legal maneuvering. The importance of treating gang violence as potential terrorism rather than simple criminal activity has become clear. The resources devoted to bomb disposal, community evacuation, and forensic analysis were crucial in both protecting public safety and gathering evidence. Future incidents should trigger similar major incident protocols regardless of the perpetrator's claimed motivations. Social media monitoring has emerged as a critical tool for both preventing and prosecuting gang-related crimes. Criminal organizations' tendency to document their activities online provides law enforcement with unprecedented access to evidence, but it also requires agencies to develop new expertise in digital investigation techniques. The case also highlights the need for better intelligence sharing between local police forces and national security agencies. Gang violence that involves explosives and remote detonation systems should trigger automatic cooperation with counter-terrorism resources. Given the potential for escalation and the sophisticated nature of modern criminal enterprises, Perhaps most importantly, the prosecution demonstrates that successful cases against outlaw motorcycle clubs require treating them as criminal enterprises rather than social organizations. The use of terrorism charges, firearm possession laws, and organized crime statutes provided prosecutors with the tools necessary to secure meaningful sentences that reflect the serious nature of the threats posed. For policymakers, the case raises questions about whether current laws adequately address the evolving nature of gang violence. The 9-year sentence, while substantial, may not be sufficient to deter future incidents given the level of sophistication and potential for mass casualties demonstrated in this case. The price of betrayal. In the end, Daniel Laponder's attempt to break away from the Blue Angels and establish the Mad Dogs as a rival organization cost him his freedom and transformed him from gang member to convicted terrorist. His decision to escalate a personal dispute into a bombing campaign that terrorized innocent communities demonstrates how quickly criminal enterprises can threaten public safety. The case serves as a stark reminder that outlaw motorcycle clubs are not simply groups of motorcycle enthusiasts with attitude problems. They are sophisticated criminal enterprises capable of acquiring military-grade weapons, executing complex attacks, and threatening the safety of entire communities. The romantic image of rebellious bikers has been replaced by the reality of domestic terrorism and organized crime. For the Blue Angels, the case represents both a victory and a warning. While they successfully defended their territory and reputation against a challenger, they also became the focus of intense law enforcement scrutiny that may limit their future operations. The international attention generated by the bombing has made it difficult for authorities to ignore their activities or treat them as a local policing problem. The Mad Dogs, as an organization, effectively ended with their founder's imprisonment. Without Laponder's leadership and facing the reality of what challenging the Blue Angels actually costs, any remaining members are unlikely to continue the organization or the feud that defined it. Most importantly, the case demonstrates that Scotland's justice system is prepared to treat gang violence as the serious criminal threat it has become. The 9-year sentence sends a clear message to other outlaw motorcycle clubs that feuds involving weapons, explosives, and civilian targets will result in terrorism charges and substantial prison sentences. The real victory belongs to communities like Lennoxtown, where families can now live without fear that their neighborhoods will become battlegrounds for criminal enterprises. The successful prosecution of Daniel Laponder proves that even sophisticated criminal organizations leave evidence trails that determined investigators can follow to conviction. The Blue Angels versus Mad Dogs feud is over, but the lessons it provides about modern gang violence, digital evidence, and the evolution of outlaw motorcycle clubs will influence law enforcement strategy for years to come. In Scotland's biker underworld, betrayal still comes with consequences, but now those consequences include terrorism charges and the full weight of the criminal justice system.